Great. Welcome back to our panel session. I've been really looking forward to this session today because this is, in the Tommy Flowers events I've been involved in the past, this is a really heavyweight group of people in terms of their knowledge and expertise, particularly in this area. Apologies for a little bit late. We had some technical issues in the background that we were dealing with and so forth, but we'll kind of get right into it. So I'd like to welcome all of our panelists, Will, Ezra, Raheem, Jerry, and Sally. If you were in the previous sessions, you saw them all speaking at the end of the day about their particular topics. So I'm going to fire a few questions at them and kind of work my way around as well. But I guess today's topic was really about research challenges and opportunities in digital transformation. But I guess the issue for me as kind of a more operationally aligned manager is, can research keep up? A lot of the businesses are moving at a phenomenal rate to transform, rightly or wrongly, and are underpinning it with a lot of the digital infrastructure from companies. So can the research keep up with the actual operational transformation, or is it going to lag in due course at the end of the day? Right, and Will, I'll start with you on that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So I think we overestimate the speed at which this transition happens. And in particular, if you go back 100 years and look at the patents that were issued in the last, Marconi, the radio, the Wright brothers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that was a time of global transformation, everything changing, et cetera. I think it's very easy to kind of overstep the belief of huge speeds of change. And what I think is more important is that research is kind of leading the ideas that underpin these transformations. So, of course, the technology flows. Of course, the technology develops and changes at huge pace, and we need to keep up with that. But for a strategic decision-making in large corporates, I think they need to pause for a second and think what actually can be changed here in terms of skills, in terms of people, in terms of processes, in terms of organization, because they are slow, expensive, and risky to change. And that rushing in just because there's some new sexy technology is often the mistake here. Of course, if you're on a burning platform, you need to move, but you need to move in a way that is strategically achievable and works well. And that is often more about partnering and working with other organizations than it is about internal change. And those are kind of often involve much broader conversations. And I think pausing and just taking a deep breath is probably the most important thing. And researchers are very good at that. And also, researchers are already years ahead. I mean, we're trying to research things that are a little bit ahead already. So hopefully we are somewhere useful in this mix. That's my take.
Okay, well, thank you. Ezra, there's lots of positive head shaking going on there. Do you have a view?
Yeah, I think I would agree to everything Will had already said. And I would like to just add one point, maybe for us to ponder on. Are we able to translate the research into the organization practices as effectively and efficiently and successfully we would wish to? And the other point I would like to make and add here is if I flip the coin, are we able to feedback what areas that we would like to have vision to develop those solutions and technologies into? And are we able to communicate with the researchers to do the groundbreaking work for us as effectively, as efficiently we could be? And I think I would also emphasize the point, collaboration is key for us to be much more successful in the future in this rapidly changing world. Thank you.
Great, Ezra, thank you very much. I'll bring this one into the room here now. So, I mean, Jerry, once again, can the research keep up? And I understand Will and Ezra's comments, but can it really keep up with what's going on inside the businesses?
I think there is this trade-off between those that are involved with the research to understand the social implications, the organizational implications of what they're proposing. I'm a telecommunications engineer, so everything's bits and bytes, and I see everything's positive. But I also recognize that we need to cope with failure and have failure by design implemented into the systems that we put in place. But I think it's how we understand, can we bring the employees of an organization on this digital journey with us? Because if they don't have ownership of what we're waffling on about, they just don't trust it. and the first time something fails, or in many ways, there could be a digital divide within the organization itself, because it's already been mentioned. Some staff, employees are disenfranchised. They're not engaged. Their requirements haven't been actually brought on board. And this is a recurring thing in large-scale transformation projects in government and industry, and this has been happening for decades. So I think we need to have a bit more understanding and insight into organizational structures as, if you like, telecoms folk, digital savvy folk, because those are the things that will trip up any sort of intervention that we come up with.
Cool, great. And Sally, I guess you got this government perspective. Is it lagging, leading, or?
I think it's one of the reasons why this morning I chose to kind of go back to 2010, because just what I wanted to show was that digital transformation isn't an in-the-moment thing. It's a systematic and strategic process through different phases in order to bring these larger complex organizations through. So I don't think it's that research is lagging. I think that there's one question, which is, can you get new and early career researchers interested in things that don't appear to be leading edge, perhaps in their minds, but are tremendously important in terms of pull-through. And I think there's another thing on experimental methods and research methods as well, because when you're in the middle of a big transformation, and it is a very pressured situation, and a lot of people get very stressed, how do you practically engage then with ideas and with research, which you really need at that point, but actually it's the last thing you feel you can cope with? So actually how you extract things from the research community, it might not be quite as obvious as we think as to how to bridge some of those gaps.
Okay, great. So I want to ask a supplemental question, and Raheem, I'll come to you on this one in the first place. One of the questions we had come in is about the pitfalls of rushing digital transformation, and I know, Will, you touched on this slightly about rushing into these things, but with the metaverse and 5G and 6G and holoteleportation and the way some of the technological developments are developing, you could argue that some companies see this as the next new kind of sexy bit of tech, and we got to get it embedded now to stay competitive. So I guess, do you see the pitfalls for this, Raheem, in terms of using the technology perhaps too soon? And once again, it comes back to the speed of it as well. Are you seeing any early adopters with this where it may not be working its way? And are we going too fast with the metaverse that's coming? So I can see that in future being huge changes, but some companies are jumping on that bandwagon now.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. I think whatever everybody said, Ezra, Will, and Sally, and etc., and Gerard, I agree fully with them. But I just want to add this one. We in 6GIC, we are in a fortunate position. We work very closely with industry operators, manufacturers, small and large, and etc. So we try to, one of the reasons that we work with them very closely is to avoid this pitfall and doing things for the sake of doing it in terms of research. So if you remember one of the slides that I showed in defining 6G, we said we need to work on a use case with a clear business case. This is one of the lessons we learned from 5G and from the previous generation system. I've seen people say that we want 100 times more low latency. I say, why? Why you want to do that? How you want, etc. So we need to have a use case and then business. Now we come to the use case in terms of metaverse. I think in parallel with the technology, innovation, and research, it's very important to see the implication of all this technology on society. I personally believe that we need to be careful with things like metaverse and etc. and look at the social impact and implication that it can have. For this, from the very beginning, something that we highlighted in our 6G vision, from the very beginning, we need to work with different disciplines to understand the ethical issues of the technology, the societal issues of the technology. And this is very new to us because we are engineers, we are telecom engineers, we don't know these things. So working with them is completely new to us, and we need to encourage this sort of like I don't like to overuse the multidisciplinary research, but where it makes sense, we need to identify and work with the different disciplines so we get everything right for the good of the society, for the good of the economy. And that has to be borne in mind. Obviously, we all agree, all know that we can use the technology for the good as well as it can be misused. But we try to minimize the potential that the technology get misused. For example, a knife, it can help you to put a better butter on your bread, but at the same time, it can kill a person.
Yeah.
So we have to be aware of all these things, all these issues from the very beginning. And we are in a good, fortunate position to what we work with a number of different industry in UK as well as outside UK.
Okay, great. Raheem, thank you very much. Will, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was in a sense going to just throw it, and I thought Raheem's presentation was excellent on this, that actually, in a sense, it's industry to keep up. If you look at the main use cases of technology that we use today, they've existed since the 90s. You know, I remember in the 90s doing ISDN video conference meetings. They were terrible, but they worked. I remember using an early BlackBerry with mapping, and you remember multi-user dungeons when I was on green screen monitors when I was a teenager, which were kind of, you know, arguably interaction between human beings. What is often lacking is the foresight that these things can explode into being used widely and have massive consequences for large organizations. So in a sense, what the question really is, why doesn't industry keep up with research in some ways? Because I suspect there's research labs out there, probably in Surrey, where the next big thing that will transform enterprise is being played with by a bunch of researchers who are like idiots like me, who looked at things like blockchain and thought it was never going to go anywhere and didn't spend 50 quid buying them, you know, when they first started, and looked at 4G and 5G and I thought, no, they'll never take off. So didn't throw his research. So I've made the mistakes all along, but perhaps there's cleverer people out there who can look at the research that is happening and have the foresight to see how it applies to industry. So turning your question on its head in a way.
Okay, cool, great. Thanks, Will. And then, Jerry, I'll turn to you. Have anything to add to that?
Well, you mentioned metaverse, and I mean, there are lots of folk, as you say, jumping on the bandwagon. And as Raheem has mentioned, there are issues to do with the hardware, the infrastructure, the privacy, the data management, and not to mention the whole legal frameworks. But one thing that struck me as we were discussing in the various sessions, we have an increasing aging population in the UK. And to what extent are all these interventions going to improve the lives of that cohort of the population, many of which are late adopters of digital technology? Will they become disenfranchised, even bringing up what Sally was saying about e-government and the role of government in society and digital transformation? To what extent is the cohort of citizens that they're servicing, whether it's through government or through industry, are they able to engage with what we're doing? So we're running at a very fast pace. We're always very excited about the technology and the bleeding edge that we're working in, because that's what we do. And it's not just in the UK, it's our global partnerships. But I just wonder to what extent we maybe just need to keep an eye on that part of society who may become slightly even more distant from the transformations that we're discussing here.
Okay, great. And Sally, I mean, do you see, once again, a government role in all of this as well?
Well, of course, there is one in regulation and legislation, and government, has to be aware of where technology, where business is moving, so that both on one hand we can ensure that the regulatory environment in the UK is going to support business development, if that's where we're going, but also to understand the consequences and some of the downsides as well. So although I focused very much on digital transformation, how government organises itself and its systems and services, of course their role in regulation and looking forward and making wise choices is there as well.
Cool. And Ezra, any final comments on this in terms of the deployment and the technology for this one?
I think all the points which were made really very valid. And as the audience could appreciate, it's not an easy problem to solve. There are lots of perspectives and angles that we need to tackle. And I think I would totally agree to all the points, in addition to making a point where to emphasize we need everyone's engagement and involvement, and we have responsibility to mature and build those capabilities as we go along. I mean, we cannot not leave a cohort of the population out of this formula. I mean, but we also need to understand the risk and return implications of anything that we do. If we start thinking if we can invigorate a different style of thinking about seeing everything, what we do is what is the risk, what is the impact, what if something fails, how we can mitigate this. Do we have the leadership in place? Do we have people who can just say, okay, it didn't work, let's stop it? I think those kind of areas that we also need to explore more with this cross-disciplinary engagement from different parts of research to society and organizations, small and big. Otherwise, we might be missing a trick or two somewhere along the journey.
Cool. Great. Thank you very much for that. What I want to do is change tack slightly, because the R word, risk, was mentioned in just about everybody's presentation to one extent or another. How do we mitigate the risk for developing the new technologies, in a positive way, but then also how do we not get into this doom cycle of blaming people when things don't go quite right as well? You see it all the time. I spend a lot of time with large multinationals, and I've seen guys, pilloried because something didn't work quite right, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. So how do we mitigate this whole risk equation within this development, particularly with the research driving in a particular direction and technology changing as fast as it is? And because the supplement to this will be, what about the people? So what's the first, how do we mitigate the risk elements of it? And once again, Jerry, I'll start with you on that one, because that was a key theme in your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the cyber risk by sort of poorly designed systems where the requirements weren't properly captured and so forth. But I think there's an underpinning thing here to do with digital skills, digital awareness, because depending on whether it's at the board level in a large organization, mid-management, or indeed it's the lack of the skills pipeline coming in with developers, people who can get their hands dirty to do the implementation and the testing and so on. So I think there's a skills trajectory right through the organizations that are embracing this, the idea of digital transformation. And they may be taking it in small little islands within the organization because there is a fear of something going wrong, because they themselves don't understand the technology. In some cases, they may not admit that they don't understand the technology and let the developers or the IT specialists deal with it. And then if something goes wrong, well, hey presto, as you say, let's call a halt to this and bring in consultants or whatever else it is. But I think there's a requirement, I think, a role for government, a role for industry, and indeed universities to look at the skills pipeline for senior management, middle management, but also those that are coming into the companies that are actually embracing the challenges of digital transformation. Because without that, we can come up with pockets of innovation, next generation X of a specific piece of hardware, be it in a base station, antennae, and so on, but to actually deploy it and be able to test it, manage it, and in some cases enhance its capabilities, requires that skills pipeline to come forward.
Great, thank you very much. Raheem, I mean, once again, do you have any comments on that particular aspect in terms of managing the risk of deploying new technologies? I mean, you talk about 5G, it's great. I know some people are talking about 6G, but I would argue we don't even have 5G embedded yet, to go back to one of Will's earlier points. But how do we mitigate the risk of this going perhaps too fast, or people deploying it and it not working initially?
Yeah, I think we had that experience with 3G, to be honest. 3G, the technology was developed and it was standardized and product was ready. And then some operators actually tested with people to find the troubleshooting the problems. So we learned from that lesson. I think one thing, a good thing about the 5G, 6G, or 4G, whatever it is, these are the global standards. So globally, countries, companies, different organizations, they need to agree. It is not only us in the UK will decide everything. It is impossible. No country can do that on its own, and no organization. So one aspect of the avoiding potential problems and issue is the global cooperation, global consensus building. And again, I'm not, I said that one earlier on, 6GIC, we are quite fortunate. We actually work with industry and different partners from industry. They represent their interest and etc. But one thing I have to emphasize here, the societal implication of the technology is very important, but we need to keep a balance. We cannot let these aspects to stop innovation. So in order to keep this balance, I would say that the fundamental research needs to be done. And then that needs to be complemented by experimental research and demonstration and getting the user involved, and then getting other discipline to see what are the implications of that one. So we need to do things in phases at the right time and keep a balance between all of these aspects of different disciplines. But everybody has to be involved, especially the end user, because if you ask end user, what do you want? Do you want for example, Twitter? They will say no at the beginning before it was introduced. Or Facebook, I don't have Facebook accounts or anything like that. But society will say no. And then when it is offered, they adopt it, they embrace it, and then we'll see that. So at the beginning, we cannot really consult end user. It has to be industry requirements put on the table. And then once the technology is developed, we need to demonstrate it to the end user. For example, sorry, I'm spending too much time answering your question. The latency. As an engineer, we kept saying to the politicians, the latency is an important aspect of 5G. I said, what the hell are you talking about? Latency. Why is it so important? So that's why we set up that robot and controlling the robot and stabilizing, and said that is because of latency. Then the politician and they said, oh, wow, it has got a big implication in manufacturing, in industry, and etc. And then, so sometimes we need to demonstrate the technology for the end user, non-technical people to understand, appreciate, and possibly adopt it or whatever it is. So I can carry on going on for a longer time, but I stop here.
That's fine, Raheem. Thank you very much. So, Sally, we kind of turn to you in the room on this one about managing that risk.
I'd say two things. I mean, the first thing is that as a non-exec, I've often found myself selected to join a board because I know something about technology, digital, and cybersecurity, and this mystifying thing that's called data. And then you find yourself quite isolated on a board because you are the only one that really understands it. And you might well be surrounded by all sorts of people that are deeply expert in other things. But if this is an organization which is saying we're digital and that we're transforming, etc., how can you be on the board if you don't actually understand it? And when it comes to risk, in the old world, of course, data risks, technology risks, security risks were over there. They were isolated in some risk register over there with a technical person on it, and the board would carry on with its corporate risk register, and there might be a bit of a link to some technology, but it's not embedded, it's not totally understood, and it's not managed or looked at in a holistic way. And I have an argument with a number of people who say, well, we need more digital leadership skills. Do we? Are they not just leadership skills? But if you are leading a digital organization, you have to be able to put all of these risks that you're looking at in context and understand them. So I'd say that. The other thing I would say, and it has really been something that government has learned, that when it comes to the treatment of failure, you can set yourself up perfectly to fail by saying, I'm going to do this really complicated thing. Those guys over there, they understand it. I don't really have a clue. But it'll all be ready on the 1st of May. And the 1st of May, that's our go-live date. Off we go. Don't do it. So there are ways, you don't have to oversell the benefits before you understand them. The delivery and the implementation and the culture and the engagement, all of this before you've tried it. So plan things in a way where you can, prototype and discover privately in a back room if necessary, and plan it out in a way where actually you are helping to create an environment where people won't fail.
Okay, great, thank you. I get Ezra. Do you have any additional views to that? Because once again, this is a really complex area about the failure, and I think that dynamic with the board and perhaps not being digital, but maybe a lot of their employees are.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be an increasing dynamic. So, Ezra, do you have anything to add to that one? Then, Will, I'll come to you to kind of close off this question. Yeah.
But very quick, I think all the points made were very valid, and I think from where I am, what I'm seeing, I think the skills, that practical knowledge, that expertise that we need to instill could be quite crucial for us to really help everyone to lead and as well as to follow, because it's quite complex. There's no one size fits all kind of solution here. But I think we also fundamentally look at our education ecosystem and how we can do things from the core onwards rather than adding later on. I mean, I studied computer information, but I also studied accountancy. It's just different set of skills, and I think what we need to grow those seeds early on in our children, if I may say, that they become curious, inquisitive, and creative individuals, so that they can tackle this big, huge, bombardment of solutions and problems, and the technology, the hype, hope, all is happening around us. And I think metaverse is just to that point, that what we haven't solved, we digitalize it and put into a kind of a world that we really not really understand what it is.
Okay. And Will, final comments on this question?
Yeah, I mean, focusing on risk, I spend a lot of time doing kind of meetings with executives and doing executive education. And I think a lot of this, and it goes also back to the issue of the left behind and the kind of elderly population question that was asked before, is about an attitude that is often instilled in digital transformation around efficiency and operational efficiency that leads people to think that essentially ossifying into strict straitjacket systems is the way that we transform, by reducing costs. Whereas if you look at something like Apple shops are full of people who will happily sit with people who don't like technology and show them things, because they've freed up the back-end services, the unloved services, to allow someone to sell with just an iPhone in their pocket. And that we can actually use, if we do good digital transformation, we can build systems that allow more people and more flex within the design. And that sense of flex will deal with issues of risk and allow us to do that. But often the strategy of cost reduction and needing to focus on operational efficiency reduces that flex. And to give you an example, it's a techie example. Netflix run what's called Chaos Monkey inside their data centers. And what Chaos Monkey is a lovely piece of software that pretends it's a monkey with a machine gun going around shooting randomly at Netflix's IT estate. They also have a thing called the Gorilla, which turns off entire data centers from Netflix. And what this is they've designed risk into the system, which allows them to make sure that their systems don't go down if some real monkey got into a data center and started randomly shooting at their machines. Netflix would be fine. Most other organizations, for operational and efficiency reasons, haven't implemented those type of things. They won't think about those type of things. And that's a strategic decision around digital transformation. Other companies say, well, actually what we need with transformation is to operationalize and make efficient the back-end processes so we can employ more people to do front-end services, to go and deal with an elderly population, to meet them in their houses, to do much more close work, and to have the flex to deal with change, which is what we're talking about with risk. So
Cool. Great. Thank you. I'm loving the monkey analogy, because I know there's a lot of companies that pay people to hack them, to find those weaknesses in their systems. Same kind of thing. And okay, Jerry, you got a final?
Constantly, this thing runs 24 hours a day. It's not just a project to have our system verified. That's the key point.
Well, that's fantastic. Jerry?
Yeah, just one other challenge in all of the digital transformation journeys we're discussing here is one of capacity planning. What resource do we need from the hardware, from the memory, from the processing, on-premise, in the cloud, and then all of the networking in between. But another aspect to this which has a risk is the power. Who is providing the energy to sustain these systems that we're talking about?
Yep.
If they're small scale, okay, it's not such an issue. If it's large scale with hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of citizens depending on these services, if the lights go out, to what extent are the utility companies, the energy companies engaging with the ICT world? Obviously, we're all in this journey for net zero, but at the same time, there are increasing demands on the digital infrastructure we have, not just in the UK, as Raheem has said, globally. And to the extent that the power companies have a huge role to play in helping us achieve the aims of our various digital transformation strategies.
Yep.
And without that connection, there is a risk.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to have one final question. I'm looking to make sure I'm okay for time. Right, one final question before I start to bring the panel session to a close. And we've mentioned the people person in a number of different guises. You're talking about the digital divide in society in general. You're talking about the children being left behind in the education system. So I guess how do we bridge these gaps? I mean, I see it within companies where you've got some people that are very digitally astute, technically astute, and then you got others that they want to come in and still do their little spreadsheets on a bit of paper and everything in between. How do we bridge these gaps in these different areas, whether it's in society in general or education, or even in the business or in industry environment? I mean, I know it's a big question, but I'd appreciate everybody's individual views from a kind of their area of expertise. And Sally, I'm going to start with you on that one, if you don't mind.
Well, I think in an employment situation, so I'll leave the society points perhaps to somebody else, but an organisation, a company or a public sector organisation has to be very clear what they expect from their staff, what the expectations are. And it's a boring old thing, but most organisations have performance management systems, don't they? And in that, one's meant to be fair with your staff by saying, in the next year, this is what I want you to do, this is what I expect of you. And then you're around to help people where maybe there's some gapping, to help them get there. And I think many organisations, when they go through a transformation, somebody said earlier, it's a people agenda as much as it is anything else. They're not actually clear at laying out what this means at an individual level. And laying that out can sometimes be a quite difficult thing because there are some step changes and some shifts, and that certain things aren't going to be popular. But if you're a fair employer, you really do have to lay that out and help people get there. So it isn't just an issue about having enough people around that can help you develop your systems and services and sort of chart out your digital transformation. It is how people then work in that workforce. So strategic workforce planning and right down to individual performance, you've got to be sure what it is you want. And that, as well as, you know, making management make some tough decisions. So you can't, you know, be ambiguous. You can't, you know, have muddled messages. You've got to be clear if you're going to be fair. I think also some employers don't quite know what that is. So what they actually expect. So they will have spent a lot of time worrying about the organisational structure, the design of the organisation, how the finances come together, how your risk management systems work and all of that. But when it comes down to how does an individual perform and perform well in that environment, they're sometimes quite hard questions to ask.
Great, thank you very much. Raheem, can I come to you on that particular question? How do we bridge this gap?
Yeah, no, thanks. I keep my answer short because of the time. I think this is a huge responsibility of the government to develop the right skills and invest in the programs like doctoral training centers, which has to teach the researchers, the students from the very beginning with different disciplines. If we wait for the industry to do that and do the training, it's too expensive. It will not happen. So I think in terms of what is the government role, all of these, I think this is the prominent role that the government needs to play. And be patient. Over the years, we developed this multidiscipline, multi-skills. I don't agree that everybody has to understands all the disciplines. We need people to have fundamental expertise in a certain discipline, but have a good appreciation of the other technology and other aspects of the system that they develop. So that's my short answer.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Ezra, do you have any views on this?
I would add a few points. I think I'm just looking at it from a different angle, but building on to the previous points made. I think we need definitely clarity and articulation of from it starts from the individual to the big, large corporate, including government and other agencies. Clarity and articulation of the North Star vision. Why do we exist? What do we want to achieve? Why are we here for? And then I think walk back from that and put practical, applicable plans, which will create some quick wins and short-term and long-term achievements. What we would like to achieve, so that we can deliver on that strategy, deliver on those visions we have. And I think in that whole life cycle, human experience is the key and the central to this. And our employees within organizations, our customers, everybody, because the ease, the accessibility of technology to everything what we do through the technology has created a experience mindset. What is the feeling we are getting? And we shouldn't forget about the fears, the anxieties, and disappointments we will have on the way in this journey. And we need to understand how we can mitigate them, how we can help people understand and really feel them comfortable on that journey. And the last thing I would like to add, it is proven by research that no matter how much we achieve, if we don't recognize, acknowledge, and make it a bit of a fun out of it, it does not engage and involve people in the journey. And I think that would be quite critical for us to bring everyone on the journey, government alike, big, large, small organizations, individuals, the citizens, and aging population, young population. They will bring different perspectives, and we are really should be embracing all that diversity and inclusion aspects into everything that we do. Thank you.
Great, Ezra. Thank you very much. And Will, your comments?
Just briefly, I think we kind of over fetishized the computer science. I mean, I've got a degree in computer science, but when I programmed in C back in the 90s, it would take months to do what can easily be delivered with tooling today in hours, if not minutes. That actually the capacity of programmers to deliver technology has massively increased. So a focus on, oh, we need tech skills. I am always led to think what we really need is business innovators who feel empowered to describe what their problems are, such that people can build systems which will often be plugging APIs to outside systems together. And I did some research with a local authority, and we had a guy whose name was Tony, who'd been organizing the bin deliveries in this local council for many, many years, who described how, with a very quick change that really didn't take much developer time, he could put iPads or iPhones into the hands of people driving delivery trucks around and massively increase the efficiency of the work of collecting waste in that authority. And it really, the programming was minor. And I think what was really needed was Tony, who understood waste collection and could look at the opportunity and felt empowered to describe it in a way that someone else could build. And I think by what we really want to do is actually make everyone realize that they can help make this stuff and then work out ways to bring them together. And it's that business analysts, it's about understanding and empathizing with people and allowing them to express the problems that they have and then innovating around it. And that innovation is the key. But it's not about learning to program in C++ or in Python, etc. necessarily. Just my thoughts.
No, I'm 100% in your court on that. Will, thank you very much. So, Jerry, I'll leave the last word for this session to you on this around the people story.
Yeah, I think it's already been touched on, but the pipeline from kids that are in primary school today, if we project this meeting 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what will have changed? We may have all sorts of new technical innovations, but we're back at the ranch. What time do the teachers have in primary schools, secondary schools, high schools to embed some of this into the curriculum, to show and demonstrate to the students the employment opportunities, the exciting employment opportunities, and as Ezra said, make it fun. University of East Anglia, we have an extensive outreach program going out to schools to really demonstrate how technology is impacting on all walks of life. Sometimes at different, depending on the school, looking at digital, what does digital mean? It goes beyond Microsoft Office.
Yeah.
And a lot of kids get switched off. I want to be a forensic scientist. I want to go into law, whatever it might be. And the opportunity is lost to them just because they haven't been exposed to the fun element and other areas where they can see employment prospects. And that's something I think is very important nationally, to look at how we enthuse and engage with the engineer, the developer, the psychologist, the digital psychologist of the future, to understand the impact of all these technologies. Because ultimately, if we don't enthuse them now and continue to enthuse them, we're going to be back in a skills void in 5 years' time.
Great. Jerry, thank you very much. So unfortunately, I need to kind of bring this session to a close. We have overran a bit. Personally, I think we could probably go on for another 30, 40 minutes if we had the time. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, Jerry, Sally, Will, Ezra, and Raheem, for all of their input, contribution, and your presentations today. And for those of you watching, we'll bring this session to a close, and then we've got another session in a couple of minutes about a call to action where we're going to talk to Seema Ahmed Christensen about, well, what next in all of this space? So I'll see you there in a few minutes, and thank you very much.